Hi everyone, it's Henry here, and in this video I'm going to go through a few things that you might come up against if you're going to be painting up a World Eaters army. So we're going to look at red power armour, we're going to look at painting white power armour, we're going to look at brass trim, and then lastly we'll look at some blood effects. So there'll be recipes that you can follow if you want, but equally if you've got a slightly different red in mind or whatever, won't be a problem. You should be able to apply all the tips that we go into in this video. So let's paint. Here we've got the two minis that we're going to be working on. What an amazing kit, by the way, this Berserker kit. Games Workshop sent us a review copy. I built a couple up. If you're doing an army of these guys, you can have a great time, I reckon. I say one of them we're going to do traditional sort of red scheme on, and the other one we're going to do the white scheme on. So it's nice to see, I believe in the Codex, there's some warband or whatever still wears the white colours and whatnot of the late Heresy era paint jobs that we've seen them in. So it's a nice way to have a look at a couple of options. First things first though, we'll go through the red, and I'm going to leave the whole pre-shade in real time here, and we're going to go through all of it because as a colour, red really benefits from a good pre-shade. So I'm going to use a white paint here. I'm going to use Tamiya flat white. It's our preferred paint for doing our pre-shading with because we can thin it right down, build up layers and create greys and then whites and maintain a lot of control. So I've thinned this with about 5 drops of Tamiya X20A thinner. It's a alcohol based paint, so you need to use the appropriate thinner. So 5 drops of thinner for every drop of paint in here, so it's a very dilute mix, and I spray at about 25 psi. I use a 0.4mm needle and nozzle, and in this case I'm using our Harder and Steenbeck Infinity. You're going to need to tweak that for your own setup, but that's a good starting point to go from. So initially we want to pick a light source. We've got a nice open pose from this guy. It's going to be lighter towards the top if we assume there's going to be light all around him, but then we can use a secondary sort of light source from the top right as we look at it, and which will just help us create and push the shapes on the model further by putting highlights and shadows in areas that accentuate that. So we build that up, as I said, slowly, layer upon layer. So we go from grey through to white, and as I get lighter, as the highlight gets more intense, I tend to move my airbrush closer in, so we hit a smaller area. It's really worth taking your time with this step with red. As I said, it's one of those colours that massively benefits from a pre-shade, and one of the reasons for that is that when it comes to highlighting red, it's very easy for us to go off and do either orange highlights or go into sort of pink highlights. And for some people that's fine, they don't care at all, but others just want red. They just want a vibrant red, and a darker red in the shadows. And by putting the pre-shade in, we can be sure that the red that goes over the white parts of the model will be really vibrant, and the red that goes over the black will be darker, but it'll all still be red, as it were. Now on the back of the miniature, we just repeat the process. You can pick a secondary sort of deliberate light source that we can start to produce our sort of rendering from. It doesn't need to be the same as the front, because you can't look at the front and the back at the same time. But generally, mine will be the opposite side, as it were, on the back as it is on the front. So if we look at the front of the miniature here, our deliberate light source is coming from the right-hand side. So when we turn the miniature around, we'll also have it come from the right hand side, which will be opposite the right on the front. And with regards to the shapes and the highlights, you're just following the shapes that are on the model. So if you've got the thigh that's pointing out like that, we just do a nice long highlight down the length of the thigh. If we've got a curve on a shoulder pad, then we do more of a spherical highlight on that. Such great minis. I know we had them Berserkers for a long time, 20 years maybe. That kit had to be one of the oldest around, right? But what a brilliant update this kit is. So all I did was put the model down, come back to it a couple of minutes later and just check that I was brightest where I wanted to be. Now when it comes to our red, we're going to apply our brightest red first. That's because that's the red we want to be going over the pure white that's underneath. So I've loaded up Evil Sun's Scarlet here. I just figured it's a good classic Games Workshop scheme. Let's see what it looks like. As I said in the intro, if you want to change your red, then go for it. All the same rules, all the same tips would apply. When the first coat goes on, it's going to look a bit pink. It's going to look a bit rubbish, really. But let it dry. Apply the second. It's going to become more red, more intense. And take your time with this step. There really is no rush. These are although they're cool minis, they're not particularly complicated. They're not particularly busy. All the parts are nicely defined. And the armour is the major part on all of them. You see how that left leg as we look at it, and now the right leg has followed. Just that second or third coat, and all of a sudden we've got this beautiful, intense red. And it really does, I hate the word pop, it really does pop in the hand. I thought it was going to get dulled down quite considerably as the paint job carried on, but it maintained that intensity. So for a gaming army particularly, it'll look fantastic on the table. And this is two paints. This is Evil Sunz Scarlet over white. That's all we've done. Now what I like to do often is take another red and just apply it into the shadows. This is because where your colour goes over black, it really desaturates, so it muddies it, it dirties it up. You might like that look. Some people might prefer it to be more of a solid colour. So we're going to go with Khorne Red here, a darker red, which not only is going to give us, as I say, some more deliberate colour in the shadows, but if we spray into the shadows and try and get a little bit of overspray into the Evil Sunz Scarlet, then what we can end up getting there is a nice additional tone of red. And that's all there is to it. Now for the white armour scheme, obviously the shoulder pads and the head are a different colour. So I assemble the model, I do my pre-shade on my shoulder pads and my head with the white. And for this I'm just using Khorne Red, just the one red. Keep it super nice and simple, a nice dark, deep red, very fittingly named as well, which I always like. But it's the same rules apply. A few, sort of 3 or 4 coats, something like that. See how it's looking, let them dry in between. Once you think you're happy, you can pop those shoulder pads and head off, and we can work on the rest of the model. And I like to leave the little bit of blue tack that I've got holding them on whilst I do the next stage, because then when I peel that off, I'll have some bare plastic that I can glue the pads onto without having to scrape stuff away. You can do any colours you like for white. White is an incredibly fun colour to paint. I thoroughly enjoy it. You'll have seen on our channel we've got umpteen different white recipes. For this one, I'm going to base coat the model using a colour called Sombre Grey. This is by Vallejo Game Air. And I've probably thinned this, 2 drops of thinner to paint, something like that. And for our first highlight, we're going to use Sky Grey by Tamiya. And this is because I didn't want to go to pure white. I wanted a slightly smoother transition through the colours. So this is a very, very light grey that we're using here. And this is thinned a similar amount to how we thinned the Tamiya white for the pre-shade. So 4 or 5 drops of thinner to paint. So a very dilute mix. When you've got such a dilute mix, you do need to be aware that if you have your pressure too high or too close to the model, you spray too much paint in one area at one time, then it will spider off over the area. But Tamiya has a hell of a lot more control than other equally thin dilute mixes. And we're following exactly the same theory that we did for the pre-shade. We're just building up through the colours instead. For the Khorne Red and the Evil Sunz Scarlet I did previously, those were about 2 drops of thinner to paint when it came to thinning, maybe 3 drops. But I say adjust that to your own taste and your own way you work. And finally, for our brightest highlight, we'll go to pure white. So back to the flat white. You can see I've got my airbrush in really nice and close here, so we're just doing quite sharp highlights, even though it's an airbrush. And focusing on those areas that are really going to hit where the light is coming from. So the top of the backpack, the neck area, the top of the chest, his calves there where they're sort of leaned slightly out, pointing up towards it. Pop them back together, and there we go. So a lot of work is done on the armour colour. That's always the way with Marines. It's always going to be the most impactful part of your paint job. So it's worth spending that little bit of time getting really happy with it, getting it how you want. I think these look super cool. And as usual, very tempted to do them. But I've been a bit self-control, painted up that Juggernaut as a red Corsair. That's scratched that itch. Now for pin washing. Again, very much, your choice. I like to use sort of greys when I'm pin washing white generally. So this is Starship Filth, Absalom 502. So it's an oil paint. So I've taken a little blob of that oil, I take a little blob of mineral spirits, thin that down into a wash consistency that you'd be familiar with, normal acrylic wash, and then we're going to wash that into the model. Now, a few of you message quite regularly about, I can't quite get my oil wash consistency right, it separates, it's not strong enough, it's too strong, whatever. I will do a video on that soon, but here's your starting point. Adjust from there. More oil, less oil, more thinner, less thinner. And see how you get on. I've given the models a couple of coats of gloss varnish, and this just allows you to do the pin washing. To say, this isn't a step-by-step of the entire process, but I did want to take you through the colours that we're going to use for it. So I wanted to say thanks very much to all of you that are supporting us, particularly over on Patreon. That support allows us to produce these videos every week over here on YouTube and produce videos for you, exclusive videos for you over on Patreon. Without support, we simply wouldn't be able to do it. So we do massively appreciate it. We're never taking it for granted, and we're always trying to think, what can we do to provide more resources for you to help you enjoy your painting more. So remember, if you've ever got projects that you're struggling with, or you've got models you'd really love to see us have a go at, give us a message. It might well be we can drop them in into the schedule and help you out with it. For pin washing the red, I've just chosen a dark brown colour. With red, I generally would go a dark brown or a black. If I was wanting to be a bit fancy, I might choose a very dark blue as well. But that's sort of going a little bit more into colour theory, and for me, you really can't go wrong with a nice dark brown colour. This one here is Sepia by Absalom 502. But I would do my squad, I'd do all the armour on the squad, then I'd do all this pin washing, and I'd just leave them to dry until the next hobby session. I applied 3 lots of pin wash onto the model, letting it dry in between each stage. Took about 15 minutes, and I just applied more around certain areas that I wanted more definition on. For weathering, I'm keeping it very, very simple. I've taken a dark brown colour and I'm just sponging it over, and I want them quite sort of heavily chipped. Excuse me. I think it suits the look, but again, it's very much personal taste that. But a little bit on your sponge, work your way around the model, and just keep working your way around. Now, another key part of a lot of Khorne models is going to be the brass trim. And for me, generally, with brass, I like to think of it as being like boring gold, basically. Depending on the composition of brass, it is going to be more red or more yellow. And obviously you've got bronze as well. But generally, in my mind, the brass is just like it's a boring gold. That's how I tend to treat it. So for a base coat, I've mixed in a non-metallic paint. So I've taken a dark brown. In this case, it was German camo black brown, but just a dark brown. I've mixed that into a colour called Blackened Bronze from Darkstar. And this is to not only darken it slightly, it's also to make it flatter and a bit more boring. If you haven't got these paints, you can take a gold and a dark silver, mix them together, then mix a bit of brown in, you get something pretty similar. Now I want to apply a little bit of verdigris to the brass on here, because I think it would suit it. These guys have been around for 10,000 years, right? But I didn't want to go with the super bright verdigris all the way up to that, very bright turquoise we get. So I've taken a very, very saturated green here, called Despair Green. You could use something like one of the contrast paints that gave you a similar colour. That would work well for this. And I've just thinned it down to sort of wash consistency. I'm just going to paint it into some of the recesses. So this is just straight over that black and bronze and brown mix. So our base coat, there's nothing else on the model at this point other than that. I will go in and do just a couple of little highlights now with Runlord Brass by Games Workshop, not only to bring a bit of the shine in as well, but it does have a little bit more warmth, this brass, which I think is nice. I think that gives it a nice additional bit of interest to the model. But still really 3, maybe 4 paints, because we used 2 in that initial base coat mix, and I think you end up getting a very, very effective metal on there. And all I would say is it's making a nice dark, dull base coat little bit of wash to bring some colour in if we want, and then very, very sparing highlight with that Runlord Brass. Now for the blood effects, it's not going to be Khorne without it, right? There's tons of ways of going about this, flicking it off the brush, airbrushing it off the brush, doing it through the airbrush, all that, and it's all super fun. But I thought I'd do a slightly different approach for this one, and I'm going to build it up in layers. So initially, I was looking at some of the artwork, and I want to put in some old blood stains that are on the model here. Okay, so this is dried on blood that's just not been cleaned off. So I've taken Blood for the Blood God. Any sort of clear red will work well for this, but I've taken Blood for the Blood God. I've taken that dark camo brown, black brown that we had, but again, any dark brown would work. But I've also used a bit of ultra matte varnish here in the mix as well, just to dull it down a little bit. And I'm taking a lot of time over this process. This was probably the second longest process after the airbrushing. And I just want to build it up in all the areas. Again, I used artwork as references. There's tons of great, colour plates from the codexes, from the heresy books, things like that. Just wanted to build it up around the areas where he's going to get a lot of it, right? Or he can be wading through it. But equally, this was a video tutorial. I didn't spend as long as I would have liked to if it was my own model. I would absolutely cover him. But it's your choice. You paint this how you want. But I do think this is a cool effect. And you've got about 20-30 seconds work time as well. So if you get it over somewhere you don't really want it, just wet your paintbrush and you can just wipe it around here. And if it ever so slightly tints that white, well, fantastic, because that just adds another layer of age to that armour. So you can see there about, 10 minutes at least, sort of working my way around, reapplying it, building it up. And I think it looks really gross and really cool. Very, very happy with that. So the final stage for the blood was I wanted to add some fresh blood for what he'd been doing. So this was simply a case of taking the Blood for the Blood God on its own and again sponging it on. This time slightly more heavily, so slightly more on the sponge so that you get sort of real blobs of it. Really gross, but fantastic. But do be sparing with this, do be careful, because it can take over very, very quickly, and it, I think, can often look like you've flicked this blood at a model rather than it looking like blood splatters that have occurred to the character that you're representing. And there they are, just based up using our normal basing thing. I'll pop the pigments down in the description. I hope you enjoyed this sort of army painting look at the World Eaters rather than it being a full step-by-step video. I wanted to include spend a bit more time on a few more pertinent parts. So let me know if you like that style of video. And yeah, they're just so cool. I don't know one miserable Khorne player, put it that way. They always have a great time. And with this recent updated range, we're going to have some beautiful looking armies. I have no doubt at all. So if you do use any of the tips and whatnot in this video in your own armies, don't forget to give us a tag on social media. It's always really nice to see it, and I always do my best to check those tags when we get them. If you haven't already, hit that like and subscribe button. It helps us out massively, allows us to keep doing what we're doing. If you have any questions at all, pop them in the comments. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Take care. I'll see you next time. If you've liked any of the models in this video and you fancy having an army of them yourself, but perhaps you don't have the time or wherewithal to get it done, consider dropping us an email at commissions@cultofpaint.com and maybe Ben can sort you out.